Hey, hockey fans, TBOS is 13-3 here, coming to you with top shelf guests, authors of the book, Tourney Time, Stories from the Minnesota Boys State Hockey Tournament, David LaVaque and Loren Nelson. This episode is sponsored by Riverside Bike and Skate, Dooley's Pub, Raleigh's Coach Club, Williams Diamond Center, and Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, which has been committed to the healthcare needs of patients in western Wisconsin since 1954. The orthopedic surgeons and athletic trainers serve many area schools. Mogi.
Well, guys, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. JC and I are in his basement, his little hockey hub downstairs here in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We've got Loren Nelson at his place in San Diego, California, and David LaVaque at his place in Woodbury. And we're doing this via kind of like a little Zoom type of thing. So thanks so much for joining us today, guys. Love to have you.
It's my pleasure. I'm sure we're going to say the same.
Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
You know, we'll try and do our best to direct questions at one or the other, but whoever's got the best answer or thinks has the best answer, you know, by all means, speak up. And as reporters yourselves and writers, you know, if you've got an answer or a better question than we're asking, feel free to step in at any time.
Absolutely. You're the professionals here.
You know, you guys both have a passion for the game of hockey. How did you guys, let's start out with David. How did you get involved with the sport of hockey?
It came from my dad. He brought me to a rink called Oscar Johnson, and an indoor rink. And I can vividly remember, well, I shouldn't say vividly. I can get myself in a space where I can picture what I was feeling the night that my dad said I took my first lap without touching the boards or anything. And I just remember being, you know, probably because he was very proud. And I was excited and happy, and that was kind of the start of it. And then he connected me with the playground system back in those days in St. Paul, Arlington Playground. He had some friends that settled in that area on the east side, and so they said, "Hey, we have a good thing going for hockey and baseball. You should bring your son over." And so I just played hockey, and my dad was a coach for a lot of those early years, and that's where it all began.
Loren, how about you?
Well, I grew up in International Falls, Minnesota, so there's really no choice but to play hockey. That's what you do there when it's 40 below every day for months, but maybe not that bad now. But anyway, hockey, I just started playing around with my brother in our driveway. My dad had a buddy of his actually weld a metal net for us to specs. And my brother delighted in, we'd go out there with a foam puck, right? So we don't crush the garage door. And after about a half hour, that foam puck would be as hard as a regular rubber puck. And he'd just start throwing that thing at me. And then I'd say, "Hey, man, that hurts." He'd say, "Okay, I won't do that anymore." And then after about 2 minutes, he'd do it again. And So I was, you know, that was kind of my painful introduction to hockey. And then we would walk over. International Falls at that time had maybe 10 outdoor rinks, and there was always a couple of them close to us. We'd walk over, and I just skate all day long. And that was also another introduction with my brother, because I learned that if you're outside all day long and it's 20 below skating, your feet will eventually freeze. And mine did. And that first time they had one of those space heaters hanging from the top of the ceiling, you know, that blow out the hot air. And my brother hung me upside down and stuck my feet in front of that heater. And man, when your feet, it's fine when they're frozen, but when they start to thaw, that's when the pain comes. Yeah. And so a lot of lessons learned, but grew up in and around International Falls, played a lot of hockey with a lot of great guys, and played my high school hockey at Indus High School, which was kind of right in between International Falls and Badette, and had a great time. And also, you know, played in college at St. Mary's in Winona.
So, guys, David, your dad was your big influence, and Loren, it sounds like your brother was a big influence for you because you need somebody to shoot some hard frozen pucks at. Anybody else in your development that you want to give a shout out to that was a big influence to you for your hockey careers?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. So I went to Indus High School, and as a seventh grader, And Tom King was the high school coach there at the time. And the high school was out in the middle of nowhere, but there was an outdoor rink, and that's where we would practice. This is, we didn't play our games outdoors, but we would either play indoors at Badet or International Falls, but we practiced outdoors. And Tom King, Red Lake Falls guy, young teacher at the school, lived nearby, and he put a lot of passion into making sure that rink was ready, making sure we were out there, getting the rink ready. And, I was a pretty mischievous kid and probably not very how kids are. I don't think I was the greatest kid to work with, but he would do anything for me or for the guys on the team. And it's a lot of extra work to just get an outdoor rink ready. And he did a great job. And he went on to really enjoyed my time with him. And he went on to Warroad and took Warroad to the state tournament a few times and had a great coaching career. And I really appreciate what he did for me as a high school kid.
Nice. How about you, David?
I stopped playing hockey probably in the 5th or 6th grade. But if you talk about people that when I look back, you say, okay, well, all the dads that would do the flood brigade at the playground. And I remember being out there and, stars would be out and you'd see the dads there out there talking smack a little bit. And I remember just the cherries from their cigarettes because the only things you could see when it was dark, and they would be flooding and the whole deal. And so that was just a lot of service by them. And I think that rubbed off later in life because I became the coach of my daughter's in-house basketball team. And I didn't really know anything about coaching basketball per se, but I knew I enjoyed being around kids. And so I felt like that I was proud that I was carrying forward that notion of being involved in giving kids an opportunity to play in whatever their sport may be.
Very nice.
Interesting. It'll be interesting for some of our younger listeners to listen to you guys. Loren played his high school hockey practices outside, and David with your guys actually preparing the outdoor ice for you guys for the next day. They don't have that experience anymore unless they have that outdoor rink behind their house or one of the local youth centers has a rink. So I just think that's a part of kind of hockey growing up that kids are really missing out on. That's my own opinion.
I have to agree with that. I was a rink rat growing up, and that's where you learned how to get the heck out of the way with the big guys shooting at you, or you got into the fight, one or the other. You learned your moves. But Loren, you're from the International Falls area, and Dave, you're from the St. Paul's East Side. Which one of you guys has hockey bragging rights as far as the history of hockey?
Well, that's pretty obvious. You want to tell him, Dave?
You got to give credit where credit's due, and International Falls was one of the great dynasties of the sport. Now their run was interrupted, however, in '63 by St. Paul Johnson. So we didn't have the number of championships, but we were at least able to step in and derail a little bit of International Falls run. So, but now it's like they both are just kind of. Now I don't know if we put International Falls in the category of hanging on, but certainly St. Paul Johnson is hanging on. They're kind of making it work year to year, and I'm glad that they are. But to say the glory days are long gone is an understatement.
So I will say it worked out great because both International Falls and St. Paul Johnson did have dynasty runs kind of at the same time. So when we were writing those chapters, it was pretty fun to, obviously Dave took the Johnson chapters, I took the International Falls chapters, and it was kind of fun to go and learn a lot more about those teams and the people behind them. So it was good. Falls had more championships, but Johnson was really one of the first Twin Cities superpower. Right, David? That was the first dynasty team out of the cities.
Well, yeah, they won 4 championships from the start of the tournament. I think their first one was 47, and their last one was 63, and they should have had several more. But yeah, they were, and it's interesting because we talk about the taking on those chapters. I thought I knew a lot about Johnson, the tradition, but I didn't know a lot of the people that were involved. I mean, you think of Herb Brooks, of course, that's the easy name to rally around, but there was a lot more to that, and it was fun to talk to some of those fellows in this process. And you asked the question, Loren, during the time when I was putting those chapters together. You said, why did it happen at Johnson? Why didn't it happen in other places in St. Paul? What was the secret sauce at Johnson? And so I had to go back and look at that. And I learned, I think the quote that I had was from, what the heck was it? It was a 63. So we talk to groups, I said, I helped write this book. I didn't memorize it. So I got to look things up.
Fair enough.
So, I think it was Skip Peltier who said that, he said, why did it happen at Johnson? Community. That was, she said, you had people supporting the program, whether they had kids or not. And so that's why it found its home where it did, when it did, is because they just had a lot of support from people in the community.
That I will say, I'll interject there. That's a common thread throughout all these programs, teams. It's not really about the facilities as much as it is the people. I mentioned Tom King. There's a lot of guys at Johnson who help make that happen. It's these volunteers and these coaches and these dads who put in a lot of time and for no money, really. And that's the common thread through all of this, is really some great volunteers and support people who really care about hockey and the kids.
So going forward with that, that's a heck of a motivation right there. But what's the behind the scenes motivation for you two to get together and to get this book, off the ground?
I usually have David tell that story because he instigated this whole thing.
I had a situation where I said, I wanted to do. People say that a lot when you're a journalist. I don't know, you maybe heard the same thing, Loren. But people say, "Well, when's your book coming out? When's your book? What book? What topic do you have to give me for a book so that then I can go and research it?" So I finally was able to think about it on my own terms and said, you know what, we have to do a book about the tournament in a way that's never been done before. And with a lot of interviews and color, because that's the books that I saw at that time, they didn't have that in their what they had to offer. There were a lot of box scores and things. So I wanted to tell stories, and the influences are many. They're everything from the NFL's America's Game series, where they interview like 2 or 3 players from a Super Bowl champion from a given year. I was really inspired by that series. I was inspired by Loren writing the 100 greatest high school hockey players. It was an online project he had on the Hockey Hub back in 2011, and that was that was the way he did it. He went back and did interviews and put together stories and finding new ways to tell old jokes. And I thought that was cool, and I thought, okay, here's a guy with a lot of connections. So I've got a lot of connections. Let's bring it together. And then I mentioned earlier when we were talking, I knew that Loren and I worked well together covering the tournament for the Star Tribune. And so ultimately I called him in the spring of 2017. And I said, I'd like to write a book, would you be interested? And I tell him, Loren, they think I was funny, but it was not a joke. He said, but if you made a decision about 3 seconds to say, yes, I'll join this project.
Probably less than that. I think before he had the question out of his mouth, I had said yes. Which is funny because you look back on it and it was a lot of work, 2+ years. We did 400 interviews, gathering the photos with a good friend of ours, Kyle Owen, working with the Historical Society in Minnesota. It was a huge project, and just to say yes to that without even knowing what writing a book entails was pretty crazy. But I knew I loved high school hockey. I knew I loved working with David, and I knew I loved writing. So got to say yes to that.
So guys, I know we're going to take a big deep dive into this book because it's just amazing, and it's really the reason we're here. But let's talk a little bit about you guys too. You talked a little bit about where you're from and how you got into the game. What was it that sparked you to pursue a journalism career?
I kind of stumbled into it. It was one of those situations where you show an aptitude for it and you get attaboys for what you're doing. So I had a journalism class as an elective my senior year, and I designed a 2-page layout in a magazine, like what we now know is called a truck, or at least that's how it's discussed in the newspaper business, is a 2-page truck. So I spent all my free time researching and writing that. It was actually it was called the Heat Men, HEAT, and it was about pass rushers throughout NFL history, the best ones. And so I wanted to do that. And I remember putting a lot of work into it. And I remember bringing it to my journalism professor, and she said, "Yeah, that's an A." And I was mad. So like, wait a minute, that's it? I mean, I want to hear more about how good I did.
More attaboys.
Yeah. Well, why is it an A?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, good lesson, for me, coming up and, starting with journalism, because that's how it goes. You don't get, there's a lot of shortage of praise and certainly a lot of money shortage. So, but it's fun. It's then it turned into the Star Tribune, and I can't explain why there was always opportunities when I needed them to be, but that's a big reason that I'm still here doing it.
And Loren, how about you?
Same thing, really. It goes back to high school and English class and writing papers and getting attaboys from your teacher. It's like, hey, this is something I might be good at. I think kind of says encouragement and praise from. It's kind of a good lesson to give that to kids. And that kind of fueled me. I wanted to go play hockey in college, and was lucky enough to St. Mary's wanted me to play hockey there. And you have to choose a major at some point. And I was interested in writing because, like I said, I had some attaboys in high school doing that for the little high school paper, such as it was. Not really a paper, but sheets of paper, printed out. And so I just stuck with that, and really enjoyed writing throughout my life.
Were each of you able to convince your supervisors, bosses of wherever you were located to focus on the sport of hockey? Loren, were you able to do that as you were going through your career?
Yeah, I started out some small newspapers, St. Peter, Minnesota, and then Owatonna, Minnesota. And once people knew my hockey background, they kind of deferred to me to go cover the Owatonna high school team. And then I went to Eau Claire, where you guys are right now. And same thing, it's like, hey, he's the hockey guy. He played in high school, played in college. He's from Minnesota. Let's have him go cover Eau Claire North, Memorial, whatever. So it wasn't a lot. I didn't have to do a lot of persuading per se to cover hockey in the places I've been.
All right, so you get together. You guys have been covering hockey for a long time. David gets this idea that he's going to do a book on the history of the Minnesota State High School Hockey Tournament, probably the most iconic high school hockey tournament in the whole country, and I don't know, maybe even the whole world. I don't know. But I know as a little boy, for me, what that meant to me as a young Minnesota boy. My father was a high school hockey coach, so this was just a part of my life. I didn't even know anything different. And David reached out to us to see if we'd be interested in a copy of the book and possibly an interview. And I started to read that book, and I was just getting goosebumps, bringing back these memories from when I was just a little boy watching Joe Boyle and the boys on WCCO TV broadcast the games. And I was thinking all my memories were coming back. So is that kind of why you wanted to do this book? You wanted to bring back all those memories for those people and kind of just show a good history of where this fantastic tournament has come from?
If that wasn't the start of the motivation, it quickly realized how important that connection was. And I think it was really drilled home Lauren, were we in Thief River Falls when that mom stopped us in one of those gift shops and talked about how one of your chapters that focused on Oscar Molly, I think, how that was her grandfather and her father maybe, and how she really appreciated that we had told a story about because he never got to meet his grandson, and so how she reads to the grandson on a nightly basis, and it kind of bridges the gap, the generational gap in their family, and that type of praise is just something you can't buy. I mean, it's just it's really it's quite humble, excuse me, quite humbling to hear that praise, and it's really and that very quickly became what the focus had to be of all this.
Well, yeah, that was an interesting moment because this great hockey legend from International Falls that a lot of people don't know about, and we found a great picture of him walking out to the ice at the old where'd they play the auditorium?
St. Paul Auditorium.
St. Paul Auditorium.
St. Paul Auditorium.
Yeah, St. Paul Auditorium. Just as interesting. And there's this guy, and he just had this aura about him, even in the picture. But the fact that I don't think his daughter had ever seen that picture previously, and now she's sharing these stories with her son. Wow. That wasn't really our intention when we wrote the book. I don't think we were thinking of it that way. Like, let's get these great stories out to the masses, because we didn't even know what kind of stories we were going to get until we started this project. But we, obviously we pretty happy with what we turned up. But yeah, that was really, I'm glad you brought that up, David, because I'd forgotten about that. But that was really a powerful moment that, hey, look at what we're doing with these. We're keeping these memories and these moments alive, and for these families and hockey fans in general, like you guys.
I want to ask a follow-up question to that, but we're going to give a quick shout-out to a couple of our sponsors, Riverside Bike and Skate, Eau Claire's Hockey Headquarters, which is the oldest hockey store in the state of Wisconsin. Buy hockey gear from the people that play and know the game, and don't forget about their bicycle sales and service, as well as your paddle sports center for kayaks and canoes. And Dooley's Pub has been Eau Claire's home for hockey and all sports fans since 2005. Dooley's Pub is a proud booster of the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and local high schools. Dooley's is located on historic Water Street, providing excellent food and service, and has all of your favorite sports televised at all times. The story that you just told is just, I know, I don't know how to, the adjectives are, not there. It's like raising the Stanley Cup, I suppose.
It's a goosebumper maker. It's crazy.
Were there any surprise stories that you guys uncovered during the course of your investigation for this book? Something that caught you guys off guard or you didn't know about?
Yeah, it was like every chapter. You'd start calling these guys. I thought I knew International Falls hockey, and then I started researching these chapters, and all of it was a surprise. These guys are characters. They're telling these funny stories, inside the locker room stuff. I was surprised pretty much throughout the whole thing. Like I said, I thought I knew high school hockey. I thought I knew the tournament, but really I didn't at all until I started doing the research for this book, and it was a lot of fun.
David, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I second everything Lauren said. That sums it up very well.
So, how did you guys track these guys down to find these stories? Because, like you say, a lot of it happened in the locker room and stuff. How did you reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, who's got a good story?" And who are the characters, and how hard was it to get in contact with them and actually sit down and make that connection?
I know for me, the short list of the chapters that I was responsible for. I know the 52 Hibbing chapter. I didn't know anything about that at all. I didn't go in having any context. And that was true actually in the 80s with the Burnsville program. That was so good. And also the Bloomington Kennedy program. I didn't talk to anybody like that in those representing those teams anywhere in my travels through the Star Tribune. And so it's just, but they kind of, you get, somebody, steps up that ends up being really like in the 52 Hibbing chapter, Herb Sellers was the patron saint of that chapter. He was a player on that team, and he has something of a historian himself. And so when we put in the book, later in the book, the call outs and shout outs to people that absolutely were instrumental in at least aspects of the book, Herb Sellers goes in there because he's the one that put me in contact with various people from that team. And then also ultimately the former cheerleader that the chapter in the 52 team was she was sort of the main character, and that was all Herb Sellers doing. So you get those people like that who are just become they plant those seeds, and then you build off of that to say, hey, because a lot of times, particularly in the old days, they had lost touch with some of these players, and they talk about, well, I think this guy's in Texas, and then so they go into working on, talking to their sources that are close to the team and still live in the community, and then they put us in touch with them, and that's how it started. And so we didn't search out anybody to say, okay, we need this guy as the storyteller for the team. We just sat down and talked with them and talked by phone, and all of them, everyone has some little bit of gold to offer. And so we just kept accumulating those gold through those interviews. And then, we whittled it into a story about the state championship team.
Yeah. Doing the top 100 high school players, of all time in Minnesota, I got a lot of phone numbers. A lot of these guys obviously were state champions or played in the state tournament. So I had a pretty good Rolodex, I guess, of numbers to go to. And then, like David says, you start calling these teams, and a guy will tell you, well, it's a story that's, hilarious or interesting. And then you are like, oh, how would I get in touch with him? It's like, oh, like David says, I think he lives in Colorado, but I don't have his phone number, but I'll call somebody who does. And then he gets back to you with the phone number, and then you call the guy in Colorado. And then he tells you another story that's pretty interesting about another player, and he lives in Phoenix. So then you get the phone number somehow for the guy in Phoenix, then you call him. And I think my biggest problem was I ended up making too many calls. I had too much gold. And this is
How can you have too much gold, Loren?
That's what I tried to tell David, because I was like, I got so much good stuff. What do I do with all this good stuff?
I was wondering how you whittled it down.
Well, that was the most painful part of this project for me. Not so much for David, but I would have, we had word counts that we had to adhere to for certain chapters. Like, some chapters were a little, we had a total word count, and then we divvied it up, and we obviously gave some chapters that we felt were worth more and less for others. And so you have to hit those word counts. And that was the running joke between David and I, because I had too much good stuff, too much gold, and very difficult to whittle it down.
Well, as a journalist, that had to be the epitome of it all, where, you're just like, holy buckets, we've got everything we need and beyond. And so it went beyond your expectations then. Oh,
yeah. Way beyond. Because I was thinking, I'm calling somebody from a 1946 or whatever state tournament team, or whoever's alive from that team. How am I going to even write about this? I don't know anything about that team, the tournament at that time, anything. And then you start talking to these guys, and they're telling you these crazy stories that are fascinating and funny, and you're like, oh, I have too much. And that happened every time, every single chapter.
That's awesome. Looking for personal opinions on this, we'll start with David. arguably Minnesota State high school hockey tournament is the best in the nation, if not the world. Why is it? What attracts people to the Minnesota State high school hockey tournament? Why is it the greatest?
Well, I would just interject real quick. I would say not just the greatest high school hockey tournament in the world, but the greatest high school sporting event, period, in the world. You know, Indiana basketball, Texas football, whatever. From what we know and have seen, the Minnesota high school hockey tournament trumps any sport in any state as far as attendance or history or however you want to TV audiences, whatever metric you want to use. We think the high school hockey tournament in Minnesota is the best of anything.
Wow, that's lofty praise. Holy cow! Yeah.
Yes. So
I think.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I think that the era of social media has helped illustrate just how much following that the high school hockey tournament in Minnesota has, and that it is celebrated for people that every year they put out a little statistic. Like you take a handful of NHL games that are happening right around the same time of the high school hockey tournament, and you compare the attendance numbers, and it's like, so-and-so, two teams hooked up with, 20,000 people. And then you get to the state high school hockey tournament, it's like 40,000. It's just, it's the attendance is insane. And people are spreading that word more on social media than they were ever able to used to. But there was a tremendous word of mouth. That's what brought Sports Illustrated to the tournament in '82. That's it's just, I think it has something to do with when people ask, like, well, what's changed about the tournament is pretty obvious as far as equipment and skill and speed. But what's the common thread from 80 years of playing the tournament? And the common thread is that there's always so much pride put forth by the players, and these are the sons of their towns, and they want to represent well. They want to honor their friendships that from when they were very little skaters, and they carry that through. And then you got the student sections and all that's just, people just get excited about that. And that's that excitement and that passion has transcended the decades and the venues and the teams come and go, the dynasties. There's always still a very deep passion for high school hockey by the players, and that's infectious.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's like saying, why is the state fair in Minnesota so popular? It's because they have good corn dogs. Not really. I think it's because fried food on a stick. It's because it's a tradition. It's a family thing. You take your dad and mom took you there. You take your kids there. Your kids will take their kids there. And it's a Minnesota thing. It's part of the fabric of growing up in the state. And the high school hockey tournament is much the same way. You get introduced to it by your parents, whether it's on TV or in person. That's how I first, it was on TV and watching it with my mom and dad and my brother. And, you just pass it along. And I think that's one of the big, you see 3 generations of families there at the tournament all the time. It's what Minnesotans do.
So a lot of things have changed with the tournament. When it first started out, we got to be honest, there was a big northern dominance. Okay. As the sport grew more popular in the city area, some of the cities and suburbs became some superpowers too. Then there were changes in venue. It went from the St. Paul Auditorium to the Met Center. And then when the Met Center went, I think was at the Target Center for a little while, St. Paul Civic Center. But probably the biggest change occurred back in the day in 1992 when it went from 1 tier to 2 tiers. So what were you guys thinking about at that time, and what do you think about that now?
I wrote about that time in the tournament's history, and honestly, I was a sophomore in high school when that thing was happening, and I didn't really give it much thought. Johnson went to the tournament when I was a freshman in 1991. And I just didn't, the 2-tier thing and the 2-class thing, that was just off my radar. I had to learn more about that as I was putting together this this project. And so I thought what I learned is that there was a whole lot of hand wringing, and it was very contentious. It reached like the Senate floor, and it was some discussion in bars and things all over the state, and people really were against it. And it was, if you were for it in those days, if you were trying to politically or as an administrator, if you were pushing for this, you were pushing up a steep hill, and they were able to do it. And they've had the 2-tier system, which was a unqualified disaster, but the 2-class system is found its niche, and I think that history has proven that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think I was probably against it at the time. Why, the old arguments, it'll water down the tournament. These other teams aren't as good. It'll take away from the I don't know. I don't even know what the arguments would have been at that time exactly. But over time, you can see that if people say, what's the biggest change in the state tournament? Well, I would say the single A tournament, the small schools have really put on a great show the last 5, 6, 10 years. And the attendance has gone way up for those events. Before they would just fill the lower bowl of the XL Energy Center for any game, and now it's just common for the club level and above to have lots of people up there for the small school tournament. So I think that's the biggest change. It's clearly it was the right thing to do. Now you've got teams like Laverne or Marshall or whoever, Mankato East, Mankato West coming in, and it really energizes the people in those towns. It grows hockey in these communities that would probably never imagine their players being on TV. So I think it's been great, but it just took a while for it to, like David said, get a foothold.
Looking back, I know that we want to make sure that our audience has a grasp of exactly how important this book is and how much information it's providing and how entertaining it is. Is there a particular chapter or particular story, David, that stands out in your mind about this book?
Honestly, and not to toot my own horn, but it really depends on the day and what chapter I might be looking at, because we really tried to stress, Loren and I really tried to stress the idea that every chapter would be handled individually, and every chapter was written because I think maybe Loren agrees with this, but I feel like athletes are what they overcome. And so with that said, you have a little bit of drama, a little bit of conflict within the telling of these chapters. And I enjoy then going back and reading them. And like I said, some days I'd say this, that, but today, I mean, put on the spot, I'll say the 86 tournament. Burnsville wins their second consecutive state championship. And there was an anecdote where in those days, it was illegal to wear jewelry, chains and things. You couldn't wear those. And so I came across this anecdote where the Burnsville gets the player for them. They call a penalty, and the refs are talking, and he assumes they've seen his chain, and so he they assume that he has had no mouthpiece in, and there was also they were focusing on that as a point of emphasis to keep players more safe. So he assumes that it's not his chain that the refs are looking at. It's the fact that he doesn't have a mouthpiece, and he asked one of his teammates to slip him his mouthpiece, which I was like, that's going above and beyond the call for teammates, man.
Wow.
he borrowed the mouthpiece, put it in right on the spot, and then come to find out it was a thing for his chain. And then it goes on to, that particular chapter goes on to it ends with when the Burnsville coach, he said, he said, I turned toward Hill Murray's bench and said, "Where's the chain now?" And I ended that chapter with the player in question saying, "Actually, I still wear it today." So, yeah, it's just one of those. Those are just fun stuff that you find, and every chapter has some nugget of like that. If it's so, but I think the 86 chapter, because it was such an unexpected anecdote, I really enjoyed that at the time, putting it together. It's like, okay, good. Not only did I find something, but man, it's like good. I'm glad I have this.
Yeah, I would say, when we first broached the idea with the Minnesota Historical Society Press, the editor there wanted to understandably get some sample writing from us, just to see if we had chops to do this thing. Sure. And so we both submitted a chapter per se, or what a chapter could look like. And I landed on 1969, Edina and Warroad, the great Henry Boucher playing in the state tournament for the first and only time. And that was pretty fascinating. And I think I read Henry's book, or I found this anecdote where Henry liked to have fun as a high schooler and beyond. And somehow he ended up in a car with 3 Warroad guys and 3 Roseau guys out having some fun. And again, somehow a police car got behind those guys and pulled them over, and they're sitting there with the cop is coming up and he's asking some questions. And at one point, all the guys the doors bolted open and they fled. They all started running different directions. And Henry says, the cop says, "Stop or I'll shoot," while he's running across this bridge. And of course, he keeps running and ran all the way from Roseau to Warroad and made it home safe. But the 14 miles in the ditches trying to lay low. But anyway, the "stop or I'll shoot." I thought I think I started the chapter that way, and I thought that was pretty interesting and a pretty good to go from there to the state tournament. And he was such an icon in Minnesota. I didn't understand at the time, but he got knocked out of that game, had to go to the hospital, and he was such an icon in the state that they had to cut his jersey off of him, and nurses and doctors would come in and see how he's doing, and take snippets of his jersey home with them as a memento of being around the great Henry Boucher. And someone actually took his entire Indian crest, the logo, off his jersey. And so when they left, he and his mom left the hospital, they gave him what was left of the jersey in a bag, and we called it a bag of rags, basically, is what was left. And the interesting thing is, years later, a jersey collector was talking to Henry. "Hey, you wouldn't happen to have that jersey from that 69 tournament?" And he's like, "Well, I do. I actually do, but I haven't looked at it in years." And Henry had it in a like a Rubbermaid tote in like a storage shed where you keep your chainsaw and your lawnmower and your weed trimmer. That he probably hadn't opened that thing in who knows how many years. But the guy bought what was left of the jersey from Henry and found all the matching material and the Warroad Indian crest that matched 100%, and had that thing stitched together. And it's a jersey again now. It looks kind of like Frankenstein with all the stitching marks that you'd see all over the place. But it was an interesting story, and it really underscores the legend that Henry Boucher is. They said when they announced his name, it sounded like a jet airplane was taking off in the Met Center. It was the fans. They announced him. They announced the players by number, right? 1, 2, 3. Except for Boucher, they put him last because they knew the place was going to go nuts when they announced his number. So they announced him out of order just to put him last. And I didn't know. I never understood. I don't know if there's been a player who got that much attention or idolization or whatever you want to call it before or since.
Wow. Both fantastic
All right.
stories. Yeah.
We're going to take a little bit of a break. Let me shout out a couple of sponsors here. Raleigh's Coach Club in Altoona, Wisconsin is located across the street from Altoona Ice Center on Spooner Avenue, and they've been a staple in the Altoona community for decades, providing sponsorship and support for youth and adult sports. Raleigh's has your favorite beverage ready and your favorite team on the screen. And Williams Diamond Center is a fun and friendly place to find your next sparkling signature piece. Whether you're looking for a custom design engagement ring, an anniversary gift, or a self-purchase, Williams has price points for every story and every budget. Buyers and sellers of estate jewelry, coins, and more.
You guys were able to get the Broughton brothers to write the foreword in your book. Two questions. How did they react to that request, and how important is that name in Minnesota high school hockey?
Wow. Yeah. Our publisher or our editor, we're talking about who would write the foreword, and he brought up the Broughton brothers, and I was like, oh boy, those guys are not attention seekers, or they're pretty reclusive. And
he brought up Neil to start. Remember?
Yes.
He wanted Neil.
He wanted Neil Broughton. Neil Broughton is
not a wordsmith.
Yeah, he's a quiet guy. He's reclusive. He doesn't go out and do a lot of interviews, or he likes hunting and fishing and being in the outdoors, and it's just not his thing. So I was like, oh, that's not going to be easy. that's going to be difficult. But Paul Broughton, the youngest of the brothers, is more that way, into the social aspect of it, and knows a lot of people and likes talking about hockey and the tournament and the family, and not that Neil doesn't, but it's just not something he goes out of his way to do. And so I got to know Paul, and just started kind of working with Paul and saying, hey, we'd love to have you guys write the foreword. Would you and Aaron and Neil be willing to just sit down with us, and we can kind of write it in cooperation with you guys, and but we'd like to get to all five of us in a room, and knowing that was going to be difficult. But so Paul really made that happen for us, and Aaron and Neil were very gracious and accommodating, but it just took a little bit of wrangling, I think, by Paul to put it all together.
As you sat down with these Broughton brothers, were you able to get some personalities out of them a little bit, where they showed their lighter side and the hockey side of them?
Oh yeah, that was great. We met at Aaron's office in Edina, and at one point the fire alarm went off, which was interesting. And those guys didn't even flinch. They're like, they'll sort it all out. And so anyway, we did, because we asked Neil. Was interesting. What was it like going? He said he'd been to the tournament many times as a kid. Remember the story he told about he would bring like Roseau hats and then sell them in the concourse for like a profit. He was a young entrepreneur, so like he'd pay whatever, $5 for a Roseau hat up in Roseau, and then bring them down and be selling them in the concourse for $10 or whatever he was doing. So he had some great stories to tell. He said his dad gave him like $5 for whatever, and he lost the money and he got in trouble for that. And there was all kinds of they loved the tournament. And then of course we talked about Roseau's appearances at the tournament, and always seemed to end with losses to Edina. And it was interesting that we're doing the interview and talking with those guys in Edina, and their personalities definitely came through, and they told some great stories and gave us plenty of time, and they were wonderful. I wouldn't change that. That was a great decision, and if it would have been somebody maybe easier to just sit down with or have them write it, it would have been fine. But I think it was definitely worth doing it the way we did it. I love the fact that we have those guys as the forward, and we have a little shout out from TJ Oshie on the back of the book. So we got Warroad and Roseau covered, and those two towns are as important as any two in the history of high school hockey in Minnesota. So we kind of covered our bases there.
Go ahead, Mo.
So you guys, Minnesota's hockey high school landscape is constantly changing. Small schools are losing enrollment, and schools need to consolidate their programs to survive. What do you see as the future of the game at the high school level in Minnesota?
David, you start that one out. That's a tough one.
Sorry, Dave. Sorry, David.
So we'll go back to the 1991 tournament, because that was the last single class tournament, and this is a long way around to answer your question, but it begs to have some historical perspective. So, for example, we had 8 teams in the state tournament. If you go on that list, Burnsville is currently co-opted with Apple Valley. Duluth East, I believe, is a single A enrollment that they play up. I don't know if that's true. Hill Murray is a single A enrollment, and they play up. Johnson Governors, again, their best days are behind them, and they're just, year to year. We're just glad to see that they still have a team. Bloomington County, they're struggling, and I don't think that they are merged with anybody, but they should be. They just don't have a. The Richfield Spartans, they had to merge with somebody. With St. Paul, it's Southwest Christian. Yeah. And then Grand Rapids, they play up. They're a single A program, but they play up at double A, and Roseau is still doing their thing, and they're a single A enrollment. So, that's all happening, 33 years ago. And then you throw in, like Loren talked about Laverne as an example. Well, in 1991, that was the year the Blue Mound Arena was built. And that was a big deal for kind of putting a stake in the ground as far as establishing hockey in a basketball community. And so I think that these programs and these things, they do rise and fall, and they do co-op. And then you compare that, though, to nowadays. You've got, some of the teams have gone the other direction, and the kids that they do so much playing with the other kids, the top kids from other schools, they want to have that experience in high school. So that's why you have big enrollment magnets, open enrollment magnets like Minnetonka So I don't know what the future holds exactly. I mean, it's surviving. The tournament's surviving. We're more than surviving. It's still rock solid as far as attendance. But as far as the hockey and individual communities, there's going to be. City schools have already, Minneapolis has only just one program, and St. Paul, Johnson, and Highland Park are it for St. Paul. But then the first ring suburbs, that there's definitely some issues there. So it's just, I don't know what the answer is, but they'll co-opt to survive, I guess.
There are so many. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Lauren.
I was going to say the co-ops I don't see an end to those. I think there'll be less and less high school programs going forward. A few new ones do pop up, Gentry Academy and some of these private, smaller private schools. So I don't know if that's 100%. You gain one, you lose one. But it is hard to see, like David was talking about Burnsville earlier, you see Burnsville co-oping with Apple Valley. Burnsville doesn't really have its own program anymore, which is kind of crazy when you think about how great that program was at one time. And same with Richfield and many others. So hard to say what the future holds for hockey in that regard. I think the numbers are still pretty good around the state. And you're just seeing some of the bigger schools maybe attracting more players. I don't know what the answer is there.
There are so many avenues for kids to go beyond high school, through juniors, college, et cetera, as they progress through their careers. And not a lot of parents, that's incorrect. Some parents believe that because their kid is playing in a small town or a small community, that their son or daughter doesn't have the opportunity to get noticed like a large school player would. I would say, or my opinion is, if a kid's good enough, a scout's going to know about him. Did you find any differences in your research with the players that you talked to for your book?
No, I feel pretty strongly about this too. I agree with you 100%. If a kid's good enough, he's going to be found. We have some great examples the last couple of years. Tyler Hennon up in Hallock, way up in the northwest corner of the state, scored I don't even know how many points he put up. He put up, some of the biggest numbers you'll see out of a high school kid. And he ended up getting a scholarship to Augustana. But there's opportunities. So during the high school season, but then before, I think a great thing about what Minnesota does is before the season, you can play in the Upper Midwest High School Elite League, which he did. NHL scouts are there every game. College scouts are there every game. Junior scouts are there all the time. So you get plenty of exposure there. And then after the season, you can play. Minnesota Hockey puts together high performance events a couple weekends in a row after the season in the spring. So you're on display there again. And really, if you know a kid is good or you hear a kid is good, if you're a scout, you'd be crazy not to go take a look at him if you're a good scout, right? No matter where he's playing in the state. So, and it's not like David was talking about earlier with social media and all these other avenues. It's not like a great player is just going to get lost somewhere and no one's going to know about him. That's crazy to think that way. Wyatt Farrell down in La Crescent. La Crescent's not a hockey hotbed by any stretch, and that's not a town people think of on terms of Warroad or Roseau, but he tied the state all-time goal scoring record this last season, and I can tell you scouts were very aware of him. Again, he played in the Upper Midwest High School Elite League before the season, and then he got plenty of exposure during the season. Scouts were going down to La Crescent to see him, and then again here in the after the season, he was playing on an all-star team as well.
Go ahead, Mo.
So, guys, the original Tourney Time book was published in 2020 and revised in 2024. What do you see as the future for the book, looking into the future? And there it is, ladies and gentlemen.
Look at that beautiful book. Wow.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
It's got some weight to it, too, doesn't it? It's not easy to hold up.
Well, when I brought it over to JC's this morning, he goes, "Wow, look how thick it is." It's like, yeah, it's a big book, and I just got to throw this out as a testimonial. Going through this, it's just been an amazing experience for me. And anybody who's a fan of local high school sports in the state of Minnesota, or if you're just a hockey fan and you want to hear some really great stories about some kids who got to that tournament and had a great experience, this is the book to get. This is awesome. So I appreciate it. But my question was, you did this in 2020, you revised it in 2024. What does it mean? What's the future look like for this?
I personally would love to see the gift keep on giving, and I mean, every tournament could be its own book. So, I'd like to, maybe go every 5 years. I don't know if the 10 years that's going to be a better thing. I mean, I'd love to get to the point, if it's 100 tournaments not far away, and, I'd like to be able to have something for that when the time comes. I really just don't see any real reason to stop. But I mean, that's going to be, it's going to be based on the publisher and whatever else. But I certainly would like to see another book in this series at some point.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to just keep cranking these out. I worry about how thick it would be at something. You wouldn't even be able to lift that thing at 100 years. It's going to weigh about.
Might have to do different volumes.
If they let me with all that gold go crazy, then it's gonna be like remember the people don't even know, but telephone books, right? Those things are pretty heavy, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Loren, I've got one last question for you, and that is, several years ago when you were here in Eau Claire, you and I played hockey in a league up in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, and you by far outskated the heck out of me because you had speed and I don't. But are you still lacing them up?
Since I have not for a little while, I've skated ever since I was, 6 and played regularly. Since I've been off for about a year. But that'll change here pretty soon once we get really dialed in, and I will be playing again. And I usually go up to International Falls and play with my high school buddies. It's always the weekend after the state tournament in Minnesota. That's how mark our calendars based on where the state tournament is. It's, that the state tournament is such an iconic thing that you just set everything, 2 weeks before, a week after, 2 weeks after. I did not do that this year, but we'll continue to do that. And yes, I will be still lacing them up.
Any chance, David, that you would strap on a pair of skates just to, go out and go around the rink with kids, grandkids, or whomever?
Well, I was playing for a number of years a standing pickup game. You couldn't even call it a league. It was a group of guys that would meet in Northeast Minneapolis on Sunday nights, and I did that for 8 to 10 years, I guess it was, and that reignited my passion for hockey. Just being able to play, and there are places like in Woodbury where I live, or Stillwater nearby. They have, whether it's in the evenings or during the lunch hour, there's open hockey opportunities, and I still have all the stuff, but I haven't been on my skates in quite a while yet. Probably a couple of years. But I would like to certainly go back and do it some more. I enjoy it. It beats the hell out of a treadmill,
Amen, brother.
Yes, sir.
Guys, Mo, you got anything else?
I just love this hour. This is wonderful.
This has been an absolute blast, and I wish you, Mogi and I both wish you the best of luck with your continued success with this book, and for our audience, really, it's got some terrific stories in it. It will not disappoint.
Yeah, Tourney Time, stories from the Minnesota Boys State High School Hockey Tournament, folks. You got to get one of these books. Amazing.
Thanks for plugging it. And I will say, if you go to legacy.hockey/Tourney Time, or just Legacy Hockey, and you'll see, a big picture of the book, click on that. You can order it straight from us, which is cool because we'll sign it and dedicate it to whoever you want. So if it's a gift or you just want the author's signature and a little note, we'll do that for you and ship it out. And you'll have a nice little memento. You can throw it up on eBay. And once you get the author's signatures on it, you can make a lot of money, right? Because we're so famous.
That just bumps that price way up.
Yeah.
Legacy.com, you said?
Yeah, legacy.hockey. Yeah.
Legacy.hockey. All right.
Okay, awesome.
Guys, thanks a lot. It's been a blast.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please don't forget to leave us a comment or a thumbs up for us on our podcast. It helps us keep us in the game. Mogi?
Hey, a big thank you again to our special guests, David LaVaque and Loren Nelson, as well as you folks, our faithful listeners. Please remember to visit our sponsors, Riverside Bike and Skate, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, Dooley's Pub, Raleigh's Coach Club, and Williams Diamond Center. And please follow us on your favorite social media platforms. And remember, folks, until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay on your inside edges.